Coastal Highway is in my mind one of the more impressive final levels in the Halo series. Halo 3 ODST was a game created by a smaller team with less of a budget than, say, the original trilogy, but even so, Bungie manages to pack a whole load of variety and spectacle into its runtime, and I think that makes it worthy of its very own video. Before we jump into Coastal Highway itself, here's what happened prior during Halo 3 ODST's campaign. The game opens with Buck, Dare, Dutch, Mickey, Romeo, and player character Rookie aboard the UNSC ship Say My Name as they prepare to attack a Covenant assault carrier in the skies above New Mombasa. As they begin their mission, however, everything very quickly gets out of hand. Dare changes the squad's trajectory, and the Covenant ship enters slipspace, emitting an EMP which stops their drop pods from deploying their parachutes. Rookie is knocked out and regains consciousness 6 hours later, and finding himself alone, he decides to search the city streets for the rest of his squad. During his travels, he finds a number of clues as to what happened to each. Buck began looking for Dare, but only managed to find her helmet and Romeo instead. Dutch joined a group of Marines to fight the Covenant on a nature reserve, and finally Mickey found a tank and blasted his way across the city streets, eventually meeting up with Dutch. Mickey and Dutch then prevented the Covenant from taking control of an Oni base before they left to rendezvous with Buck and Romeo. Eventually, the four are reunited, although Romeo is badly injured, and after taking control of a Covenant ship, the group decide to find Dare so they can help her complete her secret mission. That mission involved navigating an underground data facility to locate an engineer looking to defect to the human side, and after rescuing him, Rookie, Dare and the engineer begin their escape, which is where Coastal Highway begins. The mission opens with Buck and Dare sharing a few tender moments.
Oh, Lord, that thing stinks. Kind of reminds me of my... What was that for?
Abandoning the mission.
What mission? You dropped off the grid. My squad was scattered. And that?
For coming back.
And this side of ODST's plot is something surprisingly unique to the Halo series story. I may have forgotten an example or two, and I apologise if so, but as far as I can remember, across 8 mainline titles, there's barely any romance whatsoever. Master Chief and Cortana's relationship I do wholeheartedly believe was romantic in nature, and no one will ever be able to convince me otherwise, but in terms of explicit relationships, there are very few. It's a side of Halo I'd be open to seeing much more of in the future. Bringing you back to the streets of New Mombasa one last time before the game concluded is a welcome decision by Bungie. You spend a lot of time exploring them during ODST, but won't have done for a good few missions by this point due to the game's increased linearity during its latter stages, and returning to them for a few final firefights is rather enjoyable. It also serves to drive home how short a period the events of the game take place over. Rookie wakes up and begins searching the streets in the dead of night, and while you do play through flashbacks which occurred during the daytime, what takes place in the present happens primarily under the cover of darkness. But here, during ODST's final moments, you're in the present and it's light outside, the gloomy uncertainty of the start of the game replaced perhaps by a few rays of hope. The early encounters on the streets are fairly standard affairs and you should get through them fairly quickly, after which you'll wait for the engineer to power up an elevator before a cutscene kicks in.
I stole a Phantom, yes, thank you. I hid it in the shipyards down the highway. But I only have room for 2, so that thing's gonna have to sit in your lap.
The engineer. Where did it go?
What follows is probably my favourite sequence in the entire game, as you race down the highway with Buck while trying to keep the engineer and Dare out of harm's way. During this video's introduction, I mentioned that ODST was afforded less resources than most other Halo titles, and that it's therefore limited in terms of scope and scale when compared to its far larger, far more expensive siblings. With that being the case, I think the inclusion of the highway sequence was a really clever idea. For one thing, its layout must have made encounter design a far simpler process. Rather than having to create multiple varied arenas within which combat took place, everything happens within very similar surroundings right through to the end of the section. That's not to say that the encounters featured within aren't still interesting, but it certainly will have also made things easier to design. Bungie's ability to ramp up difficulties smoothly over time is definitely still on full display here regardless, as you first take on mostly grunts, then more mixed groups of enemies, and finally ghosts and banshees. Then you get your hands on a scorpion as events continue to rapidly escalate. As you get closer and closer to the city, encounters become more and more explosive, which of course makes a lot of sense. The introduction of the highway is also a brilliant idea, as it allowed Bungie to precisely frame the action and events that you're not directly involved in. Whether that's the incredible number of banshees passing overhead, the scarab clambering across buildings in the distance, or the Covenant ship glassing the city as you draw near, there's pretty much always something interesting happening in the background as you battle your way towards New Mombasa. Think of it as being very much like a ghost train, except far more awesome. You're following a very strict path, which especially in the case of a road dictates where you'll be looking, and so Bungie was able to dedicate all of its resources to what's happening primarily in one direction, rather than having to worry too much about you looking at the wrong thing and missing something amazing. Even the dialogue during this part is handled expertly. A particularly good example is Buck's shift in tone. At first, he's his usual laid-back self, even with the chaos surrounding him.
Hey, Captain? Pick a lane.
A little crowded in here. The engineer's doing something with control circuits. Hey! Watch where you put that!
Gotta be kidding me.
I'm doing the best I can. Just stay out of our way.
But as events intensify, he becomes notably concerned.
No! They're gonna burn this city and then collapse the whole planet! Covenant bastards! It's just like Reach all over again!
Made it out of there. Make it out of here. Do this, Buck.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Earlier, I said this sequence is probably my favourite in the entire game, but honestly, that perhaps doesn't do it justice. I'd actually go so far as to say that for me, it's one of the standout parts of the entire Halo series. After leaving the highway, there's still one last encounter to fight through as the group await the arrival of Mickey and co.
Mickey, what's your ETA?
Had to reroute, Gunny. The whole damn city's on fire.
Trooper, I have a Tier 1 asset and a whole bunch of Covenant that want it dead. Whatever you gotta do, step on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Much like the encounters which opened Coastal Highway, this one is nothing you won't have seen before, but it's nevertheless quite entertaining. There's little room to maneuver, which means you basically have no choice but to face the Covenant head on, although the odds are evened out somewhat by the fairly robust selection of weapons on offer to you. Like the highway, you again face waves of enemies increasing in difficulty over time, except on this occasion you're on foot, with the crescendo coming in the form of a brute chieftain. And once he's been taken out, it's time for Rookie and team to leave the city as Halo 3 ODST draws to a close.
What can I say? Was a hell of a night.
Coastal Highway is so very close to being my favourite mission in the entire game. While NMPD HQ may just edge it for me on balance, Halo 3 ODST's final level is an excellent demonstration of just how brilliant a developer Bungie is. Even within the confines of a smaller, more personal Halo title, they were able to use what resources they had to great effect, extracting maximum value from everything they did. Coastal Highway demonstrates perfectly that it's not necessarily the size of a budget or development team that matters, it's what you do with it, and what Bungie did was superb. In fact, considering how good a job they did, I still to this day long for there to be more smaller stories set within the Halo universe presented in video game form, as they clearly work well when handled correctly. But for the time being at least, it's ODST will remember first and foremost as the Halo game which did something a little bit different, and succeeded in nearly every way possible. Cheers for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you had a whale of a time, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.